All right, whenever you are ready.
Alright, first I'd like to kick things off by sharing a personal story, one you already know about. How do I know this story, you may be wondering? Well, because I told you about it in my formative speech. But for those of you who do not remember, we're not here for it, I'd like to briefly retell it. It was the incident in which my mom was diagnosed with high levels of LDL cholesterol, and that's the bad cholesterol, low density lipoprotein. And I went out to do some research, and I found out that soluble fiber is essential to the reduction of this type of cholesterol. And this is just one of many benefits that fiber can provide. And some of us are not, as Americans, are not taking advantage of these benefits. And as stated by several doctors in an article of the Journal of Family Practice, the average American adult eats less than half the recommended amount. Now, why is it that Americans are not eating an adequate amount of fiber? Is it because they're not informed? Well, I've already informed some of you somewhat, and now I'd like to convince those of you not eating an adequate amount to perhaps consider adding more fiber to your diet. And so today I will highlight for you the importance of eating an adequate amount of fiber, and I will do so by briefly talking about some general information on fiber, foods consisting fiber, and some of the benefits you can gain by implementing these foods into your diet today. To begin with, I'd like to specify a few things about fiber. Generally, there are two types of fiber, and the adequate amount differs from men to women. The two types of fiber are soluble fiber and insoluble. The first is soluble because of its ability to dissolve in water. And this is the soluble fiber is the type that eliminates the bad cholesterol from the body. And insoluble, it doesn't dissolve in water. It remains largely intact, and its main purpose is to speed up the transit of fluids throughout the digestive system. Some common and natural sources of both of the fibers are fruits, vegetables, and seeds and nuts. And as for the suggested daily amount, it is stated in the same journal I mentioned earlier that, I quote, the Adult Treatment Panel and the Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommend that adults eat a healthy diet, including more than 20 to 30 grams of dietary fiber per day, 5 to 10 grams of which should be soluble fiber. Generally, women should be eating about 25 grams, and men should be eating about 35 grams. It is also worth noting that the increase in dietary fiber should be done in a gradual manner, and you should not go from a low fiber diet to a high fiber diet from one day to the next. The consequences are not severe, but it is still recommended you proceed with caution when doing so. The worst that can happen is you get the runs or you get some release of crazy gases. And now that you know some key information on dietary fiber, I would like to present some foods to you that you can begin adding to your diet today in order to increase your dietary fiber intake. Personally, or to begin with, I'd like to start off with what I believe to be the most important meal of the day, and that's breakfast. Personally, I love to get up early in the morning when it's peaceful and quiet and have a nice meal. And so I'll have about a cup of Raisin Bran, which provides 7 grams of dietary fiber. So already I've knocked out about 30% of the daily value. Alternatively, you can have half a cup of oatmeal, which provides you with 4 grams of dietary fiber, and you can start at a much slower pace with this. And throughout the day, or for lunch, you can snack on things containing low to medium amounts of dietary fiber. Low amount would be less than 3 grams per 100 grams. And just to name a couple of these, we have apples with 1.8 grams, carrots with 2.5 grams, or pears with 2.2 grams. Foods in the medium range normally have about 3 grams per 100 grams, and some of these are chickpeas with 4.3 grams, lentils with 3.8 grams, avocado with 3.4, or passion fruit with 3.3 grams. There are also foods high in fiber, and some of these are red kidney beans with 6.2 grams, apricots with 6.3 grams, and oat bran flakes with up to 10 grams. So now I have given you a fair amount of information on fiber and presented some foods that you can begin adding to your diet today. Now let's observe what happens when we go from consuming less than half the amount to an adequate amount. Now the benefits are many, but I would have to say that the greatest benefit is the reduction of this bad cholesterol. Due due to the reason that a reduction in this bad cholesterol means an even greater reduction in the risk of cardiovascular diseases. And the study was done with psyllium, which is a soluble fiber, and a strong correlation was established between soluble fiber, the LDL cholesterol, and the risk of cardiovascular diseases. And Leeds Hassan stated in an article of the International Journal of Food Science and Nutrition, doses of psyllium given range from 4 to 21 grams, but the commonest dose was 10 grams of soluble fiber. The effect on total blood cholesterol was a reduction of 5 to 15%. In terms of reduction of risk, this represents a reduction of cardiovascular risk of up to 30%. In the same article, it was also found that consuming an adequate amount of dietary fiber also reduces the risk of colon cancer. Another great benefit of dietary fiber is that it provides weight control, and it can also help with weight loss. Because fiber is bulky, the body does not break it down. Humans simply do not contain the enzymes to break down fiber to obtain energy from it, and so we get the sense of being full for a longer time. Essentially, the benefits are the greatest calling when it comes to fiber, and it should be the main reason why everybody should be eating an adequate amount. So in the end, I have talked about some general information on fiber, foods consisting fiber, and some of the benefits you can gain by implementing these foods into your diet today. So ultimately, the choice is yours. Will you continue to consume less than half the amount, or will you reap the benefits?
And Frank is not here, right? Okay. All right, Anthony, I thought you had an excellent opening to the speech. You make a response to a previous experience. You tell us a little bit of a story. You identify a related topic. You have a good transition to the subject you're going to talk about. You've got a nice quote to follow up on that tells us why it's important, and why we're missing this, and therefore why it's a need exists for this particular issue. And then you have an excellent setup of what the secondary points are going to be. So everything there is pretty solid. The body of the speech, I thought the secondary issues were clear, but the phrasing on them seems a little mechanical and obvious, and maybe a little extra time explaining it or wording it, finding a more creative way to talk about those kinds of things. All of the technical stuff in the speech is really solid. So in other words, you've got all the good stuff when it comes to citing your information, organizing it, presenting it in a way that's easy for people to follow. The stuff that is missing is the stuff that makes it a little bit more interesting and involving and entertaining. I think that you need to add a couple of stories or incidents here or there, maybe try and make something a little more dramatic. You're listing all those foods, for instance, that have the different grams of fiber in them, and I'm thinking this would be so much more interesting if you were describing, for instance, a person's average daily meals. You say, like you started off with, I have a bowl of Raisin Bran in the morning. That takes care of a third of my fiber. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, man, how many bowls of red beans am I going to have to eat in order to be able to get enough fiber? If I eat 6 apples, does that still leave me 40% short? I've had Raisin Bran in the morning, 6 apples during the day. How am I going to get to this kind of thing? And you could tell, I think, a little bit more story about that. Instead of being too obvious about the problems with going to a high-fiber diet in a short amount of time, maybe there's a funny way of illustrating it, or a story. You might want to be careful about having too much fiber in your diet, because then you'll be spending more time in the bathroom than you had expected, or you certainly wouldn't want to have anything embarrassing happen to you. So take your time getting to that. Just make it a little bit more intriguing and interesting, and I think that would add a lot to the speech. On your presentation issues, you have excellent audience contact. You're doing a really solid job with that. Your voice needs a little bit more energy. You've got good information. Like I said, I have no criticism of the content issues, except for the some of the language and descriptive things that could be more interesting. But you could sell even the kind of dry, listing of all the fiber things there. If you perk it up